Hey guys, I just want to make a quick video showing some of my modular bodies and heads and setups and how it all works, because I feel like there are a bunch of questions and a bunch of misinformation, and it could be confusing out there trying to figure all this out by yourself. So it's actually fairly simple. There's really not much to it, and you can really piece together a really cool light when everything is all said and done. You have it figured out. So, for the most part, at least for the bodies that I have, we are going to focus around a single 18650 cell and an 18350 cell. So, none of the bodies that I have will accommodate like a 16 millimeter body or a 16 millimeter cell, or even like a 14500 or 18500, like those oddball sizes. So the most popular are 18650 and 18350 for the applications we're using. So that's what I have. So what we'll start off with first are the bodies. So this body here and this body here, you can tell, are narrower than these bodies, and that's because these are the slim tubes. So this is the 65 Slim. It should say TL65S. All that means is it has just a slimmer profile. Still fits an 18650 battery just fine. So this 65 millimeter tube is very similar to this. This is the 500 tube, and I'll sort of piggyback off of this in a minute. But this will also fit an 18650. But if you notice, the battery is fairly flush with the top. I'll get to that in a minute. Whereas on this one, it's about 15 or so millimeters recessed. There's a reason for that, and it's very simple. But let's move on to the other batteries, or other bodies. So this one is a 35 millimeter body. I'll grab my 350 cell. Just like that, 35 millimeter, slim. And then you have this 35 millimeter regular. So let's get it to focus. TL35. Same idea, not as slim. And then I have the TL, I think this is 130. Yep, TL130. The big boy. That is for two 18650s. This is really for runtime because it's sort of long and big. So there is really a breakdown of the bodies. Pretty simple, not too much to figure out. These all work with, I believe the top is C series. So like this, a wasp head will work with this, and so will this adapter right here. This adapter is what I was getting to next. This is a E to C adapter, which basically just means that you can use a P60 drop-in with this body. So in order to do that, you screw this onto the body, whichever body you want to run, depending on what battery you want to run or just whatever. Now you have a spot for a P60 drop-in. This is a V5 Nichia 219C Oveready drop-in. So all you do is put this in here, and you will need a cover for this, a head. So, or a bezel, I think as they call it. But the wording kind of gets confusing because there are two kinds of bezels. So Oveready came out with this. Surefire has the same thread. I think it's Z44 if I'm not mistaken, where there's like a hex kind of a hex ridged area around the bezel here, and Oveready made a smoothie bezel. Now this is also what I'm talking about, bezel. This bezel ring can be changed. So I have another one of these smoothie bezels that has been Cerakoted white, has a white bezel ring on it. and I believe that's Delrin. Anyway, this is metal, and I decided to choose the black, or use the black on there. And so anyway, all you do, put the bezel ring on there, or the bezel on the adapter, and then this is a 65 millimeter body, so you can either run two 35 millimeter long cells, or you can run one 65 millimeter long cell. So we'll do one just for now for demonstration purposes. Back to when I put one of the 65 millimeter batteries in this body right here. So I believe this is a TL 50, I think is what this is called. If you notice, the battery sits flush on the very end. This is the tail cap end. Battery sits flush here, whereas the battery sits recessed in here. And I was telling you there's a reason for that. The reason is the switches. So here are two tail caps. This is the Diamondback, and then this is the Triad. Both of these switches can be replaced, swapped over. As a matter of fact, I have some spares sitting here. This is what the McClicky switch looks like. It's a little brass adapter. Just pops out. This pops out of the brass adapter. Here's the actual McClicky switch. So that McClicky switch fits into that brass adapter, and then actually I think I may have that upside down. Yeah, I do. So anyway, that's how it fits. Then this screws in to the switch itself. So this would screw in here. But I have the zero res switch installed in this one. So zero res stands for zero resistance, and that is this switch. So it's got a little button on the bottom, like it's not an actual button, but it's a nub. So you can use one of these two switches. Now, as you can tell, these switches are going to fit up into the body right about there. So you can tell this portion of this switch is going to stick out from the spring down to this face of this brass here. That is roughly 15 millimeters, and of course that can vary a little bit because the spring can move. But here's where the confusion gets people. What switch do I need to use with which light and all that? It's really simple. So if you have a 65 millimeter body and you use a 65 millimeter cell, then you need to use a McClicky, because this will go down in here. If my camera will focus, this will sit down like that, like that, and then you'll be able to use the McClicky feature that way. Or you will need a spacer. Now, Oveready sells spacers. And let me find mine real quick. Have it out. Oveready sells 15 millimeter spacers. So you can, if you would like, take this spacer. It's Delrin with a piece of, looks like aluminum that goes through it. You can pop that sucker down in there and see how it sticks out now. You can now use, if I can find it here, the zero res switch on this. So zero res essentially makes the tail cap a twisty light. So yeah, so there's that. Now with this setup, if you were to put a McClicky tail cap on, that spring and that switch that sits down inside of there takes up the place of that gap. So, I'll give you a few more examples. I want to take this apart. Kind of difficult to do in front of the camera. Okay, so a lot of people are interested in this, the shorty tube. the shorty tube is technically 20 millimeters long. So if you were to put this on, you're putting a 35 millimeter long battery in a 20 millimeter tube, meaning 10 millimeters is going to stick out. So you must use the zero res switch, because if you tried to use the McClicky, it just simply wouldn't go on there. But then it turns it into a twisty. And on and so forth. So you sort of get the idea here. 130 millimeter long battery tubes take two 18650s, because you're looking at dimensions of the battery in millimeters. So if you didn't know, 18650 is 18 millimeters in diameter, 65 millimeters long, and 0 represents a round battery. So we're looking at this length number, 65. So 65 and 65 is 130. So we have a 130 tube, which allows us to use two 18650s. And then with a 20 millimeter tube, you can use an 18350 with 15 millimeters difference. It doesn't look as bad because the spring has not been inserted. So once that spring now, if you see, it will appear to stick out a little further. So you've got roughly, now it varies, but you've got roughly 10 millimeters sticking out to play with, which is where the zero res comes into play. So other than that, it's all about figuring out what size works for you. So if this 500 size, so we've got a 65 millimeter battery, and I believe this is a 500 or a 50. Sorry, I keep saying 500 because that's like an 18500 is what they call the battery. So this is a 50 millimeter tube. So the reason we don't have any sticking out is because that 15 millimeters has been taken up in here. Every now and then, depending on the battery, you'll have to do something like add a washer or a magnet. It's really not that difficult, and it's only to take up space. So I just have some neodymium magnets. So what I'll do is I usually always put it on the negative portion of the battery. So with this one, let me take off this body. And then we will throw this on here. Sorry about this. This O-ring on this one seems to roll when you put it on, so you just kind of have to, run your fingernail across it. That way it gets up in there. So, all right, there we go. Back. So now, with this extra space that I've given with this magnet, it kind of makes up for that space, because if you don't use it just in this specific setup, and it could be different if this cell was button top, but it's not, it's flat. When you run this twisty switch, the zero res, kind of take up a little bit of that space. So when you turn it on and you shake it, it doesn't start going through the modes, because it's losing contact right in there. And sometimes you have to do that depending on the cell, and it usually has to depend on whether, or it determines whether or not, or it is determined by whether or not you have flat tops or button tops. And all the cells really vary just a little bit, so you just have to figure out what works. But as far as that goes, this lens here, it's a lens and bezel, works on the Boss, and it works on several others. So does this. Sorry, get my focus here. So does this one. This is an adapter. I honestly can't remember what it adapts. It screws into this C series, this, and then that goes into a different thread body, and I don't know what it is. I got this in a trade a while ago. But here's another E to C adapter. This one's in natural hard anodized with this white smoothie Cerakoted bezel here. And then we have this really aggressive, not a huge fan of, bezel that works on, it's a bezel ring that works on these smoothie bezels. So this is what originally came on this one. I removed it so because it's quite aggressive. If I could get my camera to focus here. It's quite aggressive, so I removed it and put this one on it. So there's that. Now let me see if I've missed anything. I mean, I don't think so. With these P60 setups and these these E2C adapters, you can run any sort of P60 setup you'd like. Every now and then there's an issue where there's some battery contact or terminal contact issues, and what I mean by that is what I'll show you here in a second. If you thread a body onto this adapter and you look down inside of here after you take the P60 drop-in out. So if you look down inside here, that smooth aluminum finish is what makes contact with this outer ring, which is the negative side of this circuit. So it's the negative side of the battery makes contact with this circuit. The spring in this inner side, inside where the spring's at, that's the positive side. So you want this outside face to make a very good contact with that piece right down there. Sometimes P60 drop-ins don't make contact with that. And it really depends on what drop-in it is and what P60 interface you're using. If you're using like a Surefire 6P or if you're using this setup, it just really all depends. So what Oveready has come out with is this spring washer. Now the spring washer is copper and it can fit down in here. Fits like that. And it almost guarantees that when you drop this in there, it will make really, really good contact whenever you screw this on. But since this is an Oveready product and this is an Oveready product, these already work well together, so you don't need this. But if you were to put a drop in here in here that, you know, is designed a little different right here, you may need it, and that's what it's for. So there's that. Now of course this clip here goes on the side of the triad switch tail cap, so it goes here, and that looks really good on a well, I mean, it looks really good on a slim body or even one of the fat bodies here. Let's see if I have anything left. No, I mean, other than that, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. So I mean, when you're looking at bodies, you're sizing batteries to the body, whatever battery you want. So again, 2 for the long body here, and then, you know, you can use 2 350s in a 65 body. So here's the 65 body, so you can use 2 350s in there like that and use a clicky switch, or throw that in there and then use a twisty switch. I mean, it's really up to you, which is the great thing about these Lego flashlights. I feel like I've covered a lot. I've probably rambled a lot. If I've missed anything, let me know. If there's any other questions, let me know. But for now, I mean, I think this is it. So I appreciate it, and thanks for watching.